Okay, I want you to imagine something. Picture a dreaded Monday morning. You know the feeling, right? You've had your coffee, you're making that commute to the office, and you are honestly just trying to get through the start of your work week. You walk through those front doors, ready to just put your head down and settle into your desk.
But the very second you walk in, someone laughs super loudly and says, "Here comes the old guy." Well, you brush it off. You ignore it. But then, the next day, a coworker makes these offhand, really insensitive comments about your religion. And the day after that, your supervisor just keeps making inappropriate jokes about your gender. Suddenly, you start dreading every single workday. These seemingly small comments are literally ruining your professional life. But when you vent to a friend about it, they just tell you to ignore it because, that's not illegal.
And that brings us to the core tension of this entire explainer today. Are you just dealing with a toxic workplace? Or is your employer actually turning a blind eye to illegal harassment? Like, is putting up with this kind of behavior just part of the job, or is it a direct violation of the law? Because here is the truly shocking part. Not every rude boss is actually breaking the law, and not every offensive joke is illegal. But some of these behaviors absolutely are.
So let's dive right into our roadmap for today. We'll start with toxic versus illegal behavior. Second, we're defining workplace harassment. Third, we'll look at real-world harassment examples. Fourth, we'll cover what does not count. And finally, how to protect yourself.
Section 1. Toxic or illegal, understanding the difference. Right out of the gate, we've got to debunk a massive misconception. And that's the idea that a rude boss automatically equals a broken law. It doesn't. So many people stay silent because they don't actually know what's legally actionable, while others just up and quit their jobs without realizing they actually had legal protections. So look at this. On one side, we have toxic workplace. This is your rude bosses, a hyper-demanding environment, maybe offensive jokes, but they aren't tied to protected traits. On the flip side, we have illegal harassment. This is unwelcome behavior specifically based on protected characteristics. Now, while both of these are just incredibly bad for company culture and morale, only one of these columns can lead to massive lawsuits worth thousands or even millions of dollars.
Section 2. Defining workplace harassment, the legal threshold.
Okay, so we need to establish the exact legal framework here. What actually separates merely mean behavior from strictly illegal behavior in the eyes of the law? Well, legally speaking, workplace harassment usually involves creating what is known as a hostile work environment, and that's defined as unwelcome behavior based on a protected characteristic that is severe or happens repeatedly. And I really want to emphasize this point. A single rude comment usually isn't enough to cross this legal threshold. The behavior has to be pervasive. Now, the exception to that is if it's one extremely serious incident, like a physical sexual assault at work or a serious racial threat.
You see, the law looks at the whole situation, not just one isolated sentence. And it specifically targets behavior connected to these protected characteristics. We're talking about race, color, religion, sex, pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, disability, and age, specifically if you are 40 or older. Oh, and genetic information is also protected. So if the unwelcome behavior is anchoring itself to any of these specific traits, you are stepping out of toxic territory and directly into illegal territory.
Section 3. Real-world harassment examples, the law in action.
To really wrap our heads around these legal definitions, we need to anchor them in reality. So let's look at a few specific case studies pulled directly from our source material. In our first example here, a manager constantly makes racist jokes toward one specific employee. Now, the employee does the right thing, right? They complain. But absolutely nothing changes. The jokes just keep happening every single week. Because this behavior is constant, it targets a protected characteristic, which is race, and it's entirely ignored by management. This situation clearly qualifies as illegal harassment. Now, look at example 2. Notice the explicit cause and effect happening here. A supervisor repeatedly asks an employee for dates. The employee keeps saying no. So, in response, the supervisor actually reduces that employee's work hours. This isn't just a boss being toxic. This constitutes sexual harassment and illegal retaliation. It is directly impacting the employee's livelihood simply because they refused unwanted advances.
Okay, moving to example 3. A worker is mocked every single day because of a disability. Coworkers are literally imitating the person's speech, and the worst part? Management knows all about it, but they just sit back and do nothing. This kind of daily, targeted behavior toward a protected characteristic, disability in this case, that goes completely unchecked by leadership, it creates a highly illegal situation.
And finally, example 4.
An employee is repeatedly insulted because of their religion. Coworkers are making these offensive comments right out in the open during meetings, to the point where the employee actually becomes afraid to even participate. When religious insults systematically silence an employee and alter their ability to just do their job, it clearly creates a hostile and absolutely illegal work environment.
Section 4. What does not count? Poor management versus harassment.
All right, here's the plot twist. This is where a lot of people actually get confused, so we really need to address the behaviors that many employees mistakenly think are illegal. Like, what if your boss yells at everyone because he's just generally a rude person? No, that's usually not illegal. What if your boss just has a demanding, impossible, difficult personality? No, not illegal either. What if your manager strictly criticizes your work, or you get a really poor performance review and are asked to improve? Still, no. Poor management and unfair treatment all by themselves, they are not federal crimes. Being a bad boss is, unfortunately, perfectly legal. So, it all boils down to this one crucial question. Was the behavior connected to a protected characteristic? If the unfair treatment isn't tied to a protected trait, like race, religion, gender, or disability, then it's just poor management. It's totally miserable, yes, for sure, but it is not illegal harassment under federal law. That connection to a protected trait is the key to this whole thing.
Section 5. How to protect yourself. Action plan and myth-busting.
Okay, now that we know the difference, I want to give you a concrete, empowering playbook. What should you actually do if you find yourself crossing that legal line? First off, if you're experiencing harassment, do not ignore it. Here's your action plan. Step 1. Document everything. Write down the dates, the times, the locations, and who witnessed it. Step 2. Save your evidence. Back up those emails, text messages, screenshots, and photos. Step 3. Report the issue using your company's official procedure, like going to HR. And please keep copies of every single complaint you make. Step 4. If absolutely nothing changes, it's time to speak with an employment lawyer or a government agency. Acting early and keeping impeccable records, that gives you the absolute strongest chance to protect your rights.
Now let's clear up a couple of dangerous myths. These are the things that actually stop victims from coming forward. The first major myth is this one. It only counts if someone touches me. A lot of people honestly think that without physical contact, they just don't have a case.
But let's bust that myth right now. The reality is that verbal harassment can also be completely illegal. Spoken words alone, if they are severe, pervasive, and target a protected characteristic, can absolutely cross the legal line into an illegal hostile work environment. And here's the next massive myth. It really gets to the ultimate fear employees have when deciding whether to report inappropriate behavior. They think, if I report harassment, I'll automatically lose my job. And honestly, this fear is what keeps so many toxic cultures alive.
But here is the legal reality, and hopefully it reassures you. The law generally protects employees from illegal retaliation for reporting workplace harassment in good faith. If you blow the whistle on illegal behavior and your employer fires you or demotes you for it, well, they are committing a whole new violation. You have rights protecting you when you speak up.
Let's wrap up our analysis by comparing these two core concepts one last time. This is the biggest takeaway from our source material. A toxic workplace might be utterly miserable, and you might definitely want to find a new job, but a boss who is just a jerk is legal. However, illegal workplace harassment is an entirely different beast. It is based on protected traits, it's severe or pervasive, and it is legally actionable. Knowing this difference is literally your greatest tool. Which leaves us with this final thought. Do you know where the legal line is actually drawn in your workplace? I really encourage you to evaluate your own situation. Know your rights, pay attention to the environment around you, and seek out further education on U.S. employee laws so you can protect yourself and your coworkers. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.